Hello everyone, and welcome. Today we'll be trying out an ice tactic build with Taukaka. I'm gonna go on 80 for today. Honestly, I might even drop this down. I want to hit 75. I guess this will help a little bit. It's not really that much of a damage difference, but any little damage difference could make a difference long term. Taukaka, I tend to play very unsafe with, so having the enemies deal a little bit less damage is going to be something that's helpful. And then I'm going with Mystic Ice Sword Shockwave to give it some range, and then Holy Mark and Light Explosion Mystic Ice to make the Mystic Sword recharge faster whenever Holy Marks are detonated, basically. And then once I pair that with Stable Mark is going to make it where the mark has a duration and can be hit consecutively multiple times in a row. The Ice Sword is going to start recharging very quickly. Now, I'm going to say this right away. I don't think Ice Sword is a very good tactic overall. Even with a build that tries to, like, maximize its usage. It's hitting for 3,000 damage right now, which looks and feels like a lot against the early game enemies. But when you get later on in the run and bosses are having, like, 200,000 HP, the damage that Ice Sword is dealing is not very significant. Especially since it does have a charge time. Especially if you're not running a build specifically to increase its charge time. Or increase its recharge time, I mean. The charge time on it is pretty slow, even with the buffs they gave it. And then the damage you get after that charge time just isn't that significant either. I'm really surprised they didn't increase the damage of it. They only increased the charge time, and now it also passively stacks Frost. Which, passively stacking Frost is an interesting thing, but it's not really a big game changer, because you can just do that with, like, Ice Spikes already. If you get Ice Spikes with the penetrating upgrade for them, they're very good at applying Frost to big groups of enemies. There could be some interesting things to do with, like, let me find it. It feels pretty interesting to run Mystic Ice Sword with a Freezing Cold build, but I think Freezing Cold is just so underpowered overall that it's something that feels good at the beginning of the run, and it feels good for crowd control. You can freeze enemies quite easily with this. But then by the end of the run, you start to feel the DPS loss from not having Frost Burst, which is a really consistent source of damage against bosses. At least considering your character can attack pretty effectively with skill hits, in this case. So I guess we'll just finish out the Mystic Ice Sword. We have the upgrade for it there, so we might as well take it. Mystic Ice Sword, like I said, it does deal good damage in the early game, if you just want something to clear out the early enemies for you, but the problem is, a lot of things you could put on the attack slot would just already do that, while also scaling better later on too, or just even doing it more effectively. Like, if you want just occasional burst damage that can also deal some AoE, there's already Light Wave, and then especially if you inherit something like Light Wave Spread with the Light Wave, it becomes a very good source of AoE damage. One thing I want to be looking for with this build is this upgrade for particular in Heavy Strike, where it can infinitely attack. Heavy Strike will eventually also get a hidden effect where the longer you're attacking, the faster it'll attack. So if I'm able to like free something with Jin's legacy skill, or get his legacy passive for the invulnerability, and I'm able to just hold down heavy attack on an enemy, it will recharge the Mystic Ice Sword extremely quickly, especially by the time we get all the red tactics put together. But even then, the problem is not the... Oh, nice! There we go, we already have the Heavy Strike build pretty much put together. Getting the damage reduction on it will help pretty significantly too later on, but having these two right away is going to allow me to probably deal some decent damage to the first boss. And we have triple dash as well, so things are going really well for the start of this run. Which I hope is not a bad omen for things to come. I did a run of this already with a slightly different version of this build, and things did not go very well. Most of that was just due to me not playing well, though. But now that I'm a bit more warmed up, hopefully that's not as big of a problem. So Stable Mark is going to be pretty much a must with this setup. Like I said before, Stable Mark makes it where instead of the mark breaking in a single hit, it's a duration now, and then while the mark is on, you can hit it as many times as you want. So now, if something is marked with Holy Mark, and I hit it with any attack, not just basic attacks, I'm still getting some recharge to the Mystic Ice Sword. And then if I am hitting it with an attack move, I'm getting the recharge from both the attack hitting and the Holy Mark hitting at the same time. I should be able to get to a point where I can just hold heavy attack, and the Mystic Ice Sword will be able to come back as soon as it's done attacking. Which I think might already happen. I'm gonna need to check it at the first boss fight and see how fast it is there, because nothing lives long enough here to really chest it properly. Having the Holy Marks on multiple enemies also really makes the Mystic Ice Sword respawn quickly in normal rooms. The problem, though, is that in a lot of cases you get to the point of where you clear through the normal rooms quickly enough anyways. Let me think for a second. I think I'm gonna take Stable Mark. Stable Mark's a pretty big DPS increase to all my moves, whereas if I upgrade Skill Cold, it will be good, but it'll only affect my skill damage. Okay, cool, we can pick up Frostburst as well. So one thing that they did change about they made a couple of changes, which I don't feel like they really addressed any of the big downfalls of Mystic Ice Sword, but one thing they did is periodically now it inflicts 1 stacks of cold to nearby enemies. It's actually a pretty big range that this works in, which is why I was saying if you want like a crowd control build, you can run it with Freezing Cold, and then it'll automatically freeze enemies for you, which works as basically like a stun. A stun that allows you to also deal more damage. But the DPS on boss fights was a problem with that, even though there is an upgrade where the Mystic Ice Sword can freeze enemies. I still felt like my DPS was too low in later boss fights. That's the difficult part about Taokaka, especially if you're trying to run like one of her heavy strike builds or something, is that you're locked in place while you're doing it. You can get out of it pretty quickly, it's just you have to make sure you actually react in time. It was pretty difficult to see if the Mystic Ice Sword was able to recharge instantly, but it was recharging very quickly. It will start recharging even faster as well once I get another red tactic set up. This is a really insanely good option to take for Covenant, but the obligation isn't something I can really use right now, because I want a couple of red tactics. This is pretty good as well, especially because I have Discount Mine Crystal. I can refresh for free, and then get free discounts. And I shouldn't be hitting in the air that often as Taokaka. I wish this beam effect from the sword upgrade I took was a little bit bigger. I was expecting it to be way more wide range. Honestly, it could even be like map range, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal compared to a lot of the other AoE effects that are in this game. But I guess it's not that bad. I was just expecting a bit more out of it for some reason. But I think it does help out quite a bit with one of the big problems in the Mystic Sword, just not hitting in a wide enough range. Its range isn't really that bad, especially if you're a melee character that's already setting it off right in front of enemies. But you can't really use this too effectively as a ranged character, which I guess kind of makes sense anyways, because it's supposed to be more of a melee tool. But the problem with it, like I said, is just it doesn't really do anything good enough right now, or unique enough to be worth taking over already existing options. So you have, like, Light Wave I mentioned is something you can take for occasional burst damage with some AoE on top of it. And then Light Wave also builds into a lot of really good tactic stuff, like it has really good synergy with Holy Marks and Light Spears, that type of thing. And then if you're a character like Taokaka, who has a lot of really high multi-hitting attacks to be able to charge the Mystic Sword up, you might as well just take Frost Attack and Frost Burst. and then you'll get a lot more DPS output that way than you would from the Mystic Sword. And then Frost Attack plus Frost Burst is just a singular thing that only uses one tactic slot, whereas if you want the Mystic Sword to be any kind of decent, and then it still ends up being underwhelming anyways, you need other slots to increase the charging speed of it, like Holy Mark, and with Light Explosion, Mystic Ice. The other one you can go for is Flash Freeze Repair, where triggering Frost Burst will increase the repair progress. That just makes it pretty awkward to use, though, in just another kind of way, because now you're having to use your skills to trigger the Frost Burst, or wait for this to get 10 stacks on its own, and then you have to switch back to your heavy attacks. So it's a very awkward thing to use, just overall. And then, like, I feel like the characters that you would want to use it on and the situations you would want to use it on would just benefit from other tactics more. The benefit you get from, like, following all of its rule sets of you need basic attacks to charge it up and then heavy attacks to fire it aren't worth the actual output you get from using it. The only other character I would really, like, want to put it on personally, maybe, is S. Because S has really high multi-hit counts on her basic attacks with her crest upgrades. The problem with S, though, is that... so here's Flash Freeze Repair, I talked about it before. It's just another way of repairing the Ice Sword faster. So anyways, my problem with using this on S is that her air attacks are significantly faster than her grounded attacks, if you're getting some of her upgrades where you can reset your air combos and stuff. So even though she could charge the Ice Sword very quickly, I would have to be doing like an awkward playstyle where I do my air attacks quickly and then I return to the ground, do a heavy strike, and then go back to air attacks. So I don't think it's really something I would want to use, but if you do play more of a grounded S style, she is a character that could charge the Ice Sword quickly. I gotta pay a little bit more attention here. There's a couple stages in Stage 1 that I think are legitimately harder than any other stages in the game. Or, not necessarily any other, but a lot of the other stages. In particular, when you have some of the entropy settings for enemies attack faster and more enemies spawn. There's a couple different of the survival stages on Area 1 that are very difficult to deal with because of all the enemy spawns, how fast they're attacking, and then also that early in the run, you usually don't have that great of tools to deal with them. I guess the one I just went through was in Area 2, actually, but there is one that's similar in Area 1, where they throw a bunch of... I'm really not seeing what I want. I will take Legacy Icicle just to have another way of applying Frost, mostly. It's not really necessary or anything, so you could switch out the slot for something else if you wanted. But yeah, there is a place in Area 1 where ranged enemies spawn on a platform above you, and most characters can't get up onto that platform without having some kind of extra movement tool in their kit. That one is very difficult to deal with without a lot of potentials. Oh, I still don't have Summon Ice Spikes yet, but that's fine. I do want to pick up Summon Ice Spikes as well for this build, but there's no real rush for it. Did I freeze him in time? Yeah, I did. Unfortunately, I wasn't really in a good position to start heavy striking again. This boss in particular is even more of a pain to try and sit here and heavy strike against because of his tornadoes covering him. Even if I have him frozen, if there's a tornado up, I just don't really have much of an option. But right here, for, like, example, there's no tornadoes up and he's in stun state. I can just do this forever now. I don't think a lot of that damage was even coming from the Mystic Ice Sword. It's mostly going to be coming from just the heavy strike itself, stacking up in hits, and then Holy Mark plus Stable Mark will be adding in a lot of extra damage to those multi-hits. I'm not a fan of this one. If you had low enough HP pool from like a black market or something, then sure, it could be decent maybe. But the problem is, it's a 2% chance to change your own HP to 150%. The wording on that is very important. So even if I'm at like my max HP of 300%, it will drop it down to 150%. So if you're ever below that, then it's a good heal. But if you have a high HP pool already, to where you're going to be consistently above that, then it's just going to hurt you. It's kind of like Ragna's draining mechanic in that kind of way, where if you're already low HP, then you're going to be getting healed from the HP draining moves. But if you're high HP, they're going to take more HP. I could start going for some of this stuff. It would give me a source of skill damage to proc my Frost Burst. But I think I would rather go for... If I'm going to get some skill-based stuff, I would rather take, I think it's called Falling Cat. Or, no, it's Watch Your Feet. Nope. Watch Your Feet is the down attack one. I was right the first time. This gets some pretty good invincibility frames once you have the follow-up ground attacks for it, and it ends up dealing pretty good damage as you upgrade it more, so I am going to take shadow upgrades if I see them, because those are very universally good for Taukaka. But if I see Falling Cat, I'll also pick it up. That'll probably be my main damage source for Susano. I want to see how long it takes for the Ice Sword to proc Frostburst. It seems, yeah, that was a very long time. So while it does apply stacks, it is quite slow. Now, Frostburst does take 10 stacks before it goes off. But even then, it taking that long to do 10 stacks is quite a while. But even just having one stack on the enemy does slow them down from their movement and attacking, so just having that passive aura of Frost isn't a bad thing. And then the passive from the Mystic Ice Sword is much better with Freezing Cold, since with Freezing Cold, they don't need multiple stacks, it just needs multiple enemies. But like I mentioned before, I don't think Freezing Cold is that strong of an option overall. In most cases, you're better off just going with something that does more damage instead of getting crowd control. Because if you can one-shot the regular enemies, that's a much better source of crowd control than anything else. Death is a very strong source of crowd control. And then the other problem with taking the freezing upgrade instead of Frost Burst is that you can't really get any damage out of it from boss fights. So if you were trying to go for like a more optimal build path than what I'm doing right now, you would want to pick up the ice spikes before the legacy icicles. The legacy icicles aren't really gonna do much. I just threw them in because I'm using ice tactic rates anyways, and they will apply some more frost stacks occasionally, so I might as well take them. There's not really anything else I would want too much on that slot anyways. Maybe something like Legacy Black Hole to make the normal rooms easier, but other than that, not really. If you are going the freezing route, though, for Frost, there is a pretty interesting interaction for a red tactic with the legacy icicles, where when enemies are frozen, they'll generate icicles underneath them. It looks really cool, but in terms of effectiveness, it doesn't really do any notable damage, unfortunately. Which is a shame, because it's a really cool tactic to look at. It just doesn't do much. I don't really like shopping until the end, but oh well. It doesn't really matter that much. As long as I have a decent amount of money saved up for the shop, it's not a waste to go into it. I just won't go into the shop before the boss fight, probably. Oh, we can max out the shadows. I don't think I really want to bother too much with buying tactics anymore. So if you do want a really safe build to go with for Taukaka, and it's really easy to play, you can just max out Dancing Edge, and then get the hidden effect for it, where it can be used infinitely, and you're pretty much safe all the time. You can just press nothing but dash. The dashes have some invulnerability on them. It is still possible to get hit, but it's pretty rare that you get hit. And then it does okay damage on top of that, so it's basically like easy mode for Taukaka. My problem with it, that I'm really surprised they haven't fixed, is that you can't cancel out of these with like another dash or with jumping or anything, or you can kind of do it with the dash attacks, but even then, it's not nearly as smooth as canceling out of other things. So like, for example, instead of doing my entire dash animation, like this would be the full dash animation, I can cancel out of it as soon as I want by jumping. However, that's just not the case for some reason with these dash moves. You can't do your next action until the dash animation is completely done. Which is really out of place for this game, because you can you can cancel most moves, either through a jump or a dash or another move. You can't always cancel every single move, and you can't always cancel every move the same way. So, like, some moves can be dash canceled, but not jump canceled. But with this one, it's just, it feels so awkward to use because of that, for me at least. So this will be another nice potential to pick up for a heavy attack build, or even if you're running a dash attack build. The 50% damage reduction also applies to heavy strikes, so that's why I want to pick it up here. You still don't want to be tanking damage if you're playing at any kind of high entropy, but it does help in the cases that you do end up taking damage. I've never really tried it out, but I feel like you could probably stack that with Ragna's second legacy passive that heals you, and then Hakumen's second legacy, which gives damage reduction for an amount of time. And I feel like you could probably tank through even like a high difficulty boss pretty effectively with that. Ragna's second legacy on multi-hitting moves gives a lot of HP back, and then having the 2 sources of damage reduction on top of that would probably allow you to just sit there and heavy strike pretty effectively. The problem is none of that stuff is going to last for very long. I guess I'll go to the Sortisho here. I'm just gonna go to the exchange anyways. I don't have as much money as I normally would, but since I have 2 free refreshes, I can get extra stuff on discount without having to pay money for the refreshes, and then I can also just refresh for free if there's not a potential. I guess I'll go ahead and get triple jump. I'm still missing... Oh, fast kill at MP recovery is going to be nice. And then I should have enough for the debuff removal as well. So I'm still missing a potential I need to make my skill attack invulnerable, but that should be okay for now. That didn't have... Oh! I am pretty sure that move ignores dash frames. I just forgot about that for some reason. I was confused at how I got hit there while dashing, but any move that has a purple exclamation mark on it means that it will ignore dodges. It won't ignore if something says it has invincibility frames, but it does ignore dodges specifically, and moves that say they have dodge frames. Okay, here we go, and then the final thing that you need to pick up is, honestly, you might as well, if you're doing a heavy attack build, just max out all the dash attacks too, because the dash attacks are quite useful for normal rooms, and then the heavy strikes, if you have a way to like freeze the enemy, are good for boss fights. But anyways, we'll get the rest of the hidden effects that we need here. For heavy strike, you can see at the bottom, now the longer we heavy strike, the more damage it'll do. And it'll leave a bigger claw mark afterwards as well. Let's see what Black Market has for us this time. I may or may not take it depending on... Well, if we go for more tactic damage again. Which, honestly, I feel like I need to make the Mystic Ice Sword do anything at all. Now the Mystic Sword's doing a solid 9k now, but that's because it has a 150% damage boost on it, not because the Mystic Ice Sword itself is any good. So that's how you make bad tactics better. You just hope you get a good, you hope you get the right black market, because that is totally a viable strategy to rely on. I think the Mystic Ice Sword could be... It could be very interesting if they give it some more updates. But right now, it's just not in a place where it's worth taking over other options. Oh, that's not the one I want. I'm gonna need to get a light stage. I gotta remember that. This honestly wouldn't be a bad option, but we're gonna pick up one that's even better. That game's gonna give me another ice stage anyways, I guess. Which is fine, I'll just get some random ascensions out of it. I don't think I mentioned it yet this run, but something that's useful to get used to doing on Taukaka is using your skill in like bursts, like I was doing there. You just use the skill and immediately come out of it right away. Unless you're going to be using like the skill for DPS, which you definitely can, especially with like a Frostverse build. You can see it does shred through enemies quite effectively. But I like using her normal attack stuff more in a lot of cases. Just personal preference, not anything about which is better. But anyways, so if you're not using her skill just like continuously, it's still worth it to double tap it sometimes, especially if you're in the middle of enemies. You get a little bit of invincibility frames when you enter and exit it, so by doing that consecutively like that, you can stack the invincibility frames. It's not like a ton of frames that you get, but it does allow you to avoid enemy hits that way. It's also just very good for... It hits enemies in a decent-sized range, and it deals a little bit of burst damage and disrupts them from attacking, as long as they're not in super armor. Do I want to go for the... I don't like passing potentials. Even if it means I don't get the other red tactic that I need, I don't really care. In this case, I probably should have gotten the other red tactic, though, because it is pretty important. If I was on a Transcendence run, I would care a lot more. Anything outside of Transcendence is kind of basically just casual mode for me at this point. I've played the game enough that it's not too much of a... It's not really that difficult anymore. So I care a lot less about being optimal like I would if I was playing Transcendence. This would probably be a good idea to pick up in case I get Oried as a boss. It's pretty difficult for a Taukaka to hit air enemies, unless you have this. This just lets you air attack as many times as you want, until you run out of air height at least. But I'm just gonna keep looking for Falling Cat stuff. Specifically, I definitely wanted that first upgrade for Falling Cat, where you follow up with attacks, because that's where the invincibility of Falling Cat will be. I'd rather buy a tactic at, like, white, because it's going to be a red tactic that I'm picking up anyways. So spending the extra for, like, a purple or a gold isn't really worth it in this case. So here, buying a blue will be a lot more efficient. And then now, when Ice Spike hits an enemy, it applies a holy mark and detonates it. So now Ice Spike marks are also going to be contributing to stacking up the Ice Sword even faster. So with this build, you have a ton of different sources of being able to stack up the sword faster. So even, like, not on a multi-hitting character, it would probably come back pretty quickly. You have Flash Freeze Repair, where Frost Burst will repair it. You have Light Explosion Mystic Ice, where hitting Holy Marks repairs it faster, and then you want to take Stable Mark, so you can hit the marks consecutively a bunch of times. And then, on top of that, Ice Spikes also end up repairing it faster, too, due to having the Light Explosion Mystic Ice. So if they ever make the sword a lot stronger in terms of damage, or do something else that's pretty useful, this could definitely turn into a very strong build very quickly. It just needs some kind of buff, even more so than what they've already given it. Which is basically what happened with what I call the Blender build, with Poison and... Poison... You need Skill Poison Ring and Summon Blade Ring. That makes the Blade Rings get stuck. Wow! Oh wait, we have 150% tactic damage. Okay. I was gonna say, that boss died really fast, but a lot of it's from the tactic damage. But anyway, there's what I call a Blender build. You can check all my builds, there's a link in the description. There's one called the Blender build that was always just very average until it got just some pretty slight... I guess I don't know how high the numbers on it was, but it got some damage buffs, and then it turned from being a very average build into an extremely powerful one. And that could easily happen. Oops, I messed up there. Oh well. It's fine. I'm really only entering that shop to cycle the... I'm gonna grab some HP here. Actually, that's probably not worth it. If I use the mixture in the middle of a fight, then it would give me more healing than the HP I got. It's fine. Wait, where'd she go? I didn't even attack her. Oh no, we're having a repeat of when I did the fire build. When I did the fire build on Bullet recently, Non accidentally just died to tactics. Poor Elevator Non. She has such low base HP. So again, I don't really care about spending at these exchanges. All I really care about is getting through the 2 boss fights while not reducing my timer from entropy settings. Which in this case I have 14 minutes, so it's not necessary, but I don't feel like going through and full clearing the entirety of the normal stages. I just wanted to get to the boss fights. I only did 1 boss fight, didn't I? I thought doing that I would see both of them. Or did I just go through the bosses too fast that I don't even remember? I remember doing Elevator Non, but I don't remember doing a second one. Man, we are doing really high damage output at this point. I think most of that damage output is coming from summon ice spikes with the ice spike marks, though, and then the tactic damage boost on top of it from the black market. In Reki especially, the Mystic Ice Sword is going to have a hard time, for one, just finding time to use it, and then also Reki moves around so much that it's going to be hard to hit her with it. I need to actually pay attention to what I'm doing here, too. Even if I died there, I knew I had the revive, so I wasn't really that concerned with paying too much attention. So one way to make the Heavy Strike build a lot safer in high entropy stuff is that you can take the first hidden effect here. During Heavy Strike, press down to switch to the down attacks, and you become invulnerable briefly. So if you time this really well, you can actually get through boss fights by just holding your heavy attacks and then switching to the down attacks at the proper time. It's not something I've ever actually learned the timing for, but if you're a Taukaka main, it's probably worth doing. And then I guess another thing to talk about is that one of the changes that they made to the Ice Sword is that if it misses an enemy, it will recharge instantly instead of getting wasted. Which I'm wondering if you can abuse with the range slash like this and just stay out of range of a boss and continuously hit it. I don't know if it counts the range slash or not. I think we can kill this fast enough that it doesn't really matter that I'm on low HP. Especially if I just stay in, like, Falling Cat for invincibility. Oh my gosh! Yeah, having the Skill Frost plus the Falling Cat multi-hits and then Frost Burst with the 150% damage increase from Black Market is just going to absolutely melt. Oh, especially if they group up like this. I think they both take separate damage, but they share the same HP pool. Oh, it's so weird seeing things just die to random tactic damage. For a long time, I wasn't using black markets at all. And this is partially why, because they break the game and they make builds that I'm trying to show off look way stronger than they actually are. So just keep that in mind. It's something I always make sure to mention, but even then, it's really easy for people to take random clips out of context and then be like, oh, look, this build is so strong. I've talked about that in the past, so I like to avoid that type of thing as much as possible. Which is kind of unfortunate, because I think it would be kind of funny to upload some of these clips to, like, YouTube Shorts and maybe get some views from that side of things. But like I said, I don't like the aspect of having a clip without context. Oh, this should be just basically free damage for me while he's locked in there. And then he'll get stunned afterwards, so... Wow. Who would have known that things die really fast if you have 150%. Actually, I have a 200% damage bonus to tactics now that I got my 4th red effect. Because if I remember right, it's 50% per red tactic. That black market is just really broken. I'm gonna delete this character so it doesn't really matter what I select for tactics here. 18 minutes for normal AD clear is not fast by any means, but it's not slow either. Especially, like, if... I don't know how I would speedrun with Taukaka. It's not something I've tried yet. I'd probably have to take, maybe, like, impulses for tactics, and then use her skill to just kind of fly around the screen and clear out normal enemies. Being able to clear out normal enemies really efficiently is something that's really important for speedrunning. Being able to one-shot bosses is also important, but overall, you see way many more normal rooms than boss rooms, so any small losses made from killing normal enemy rooms, even slightly slower, really add up across the course of the speedrun. But anyways, that's a completely different topic for another day. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.